so many dance classes, I feel like you're trying to get the dance right, and either you can dance or you can't dance. But inherently, we can all dance. We can all imagine like little babies bopping to music or little girls twirling around when they hear a song that they like. And then as far as embodiment goes, and one thing that I did want to mention is that sometimes when you're coming into embodiment, and this was definitely true for me, is that it doesn't feel joyful and good right away. You kind of feel all the hurty bits that you were ignoring for so long for a while, and kind of have to sit with your body and become really honest with yourself about how maybe you haven't served and honored your body in the best way for however long that stressful situation's been going on.
Do you remember what it feels like to be comfortable in your own skin? Not just confident, but also pain-free, relaxed, healthy, and carefree? Think about the most robust version of your own childhood body. This is what lifeiness feels like. A joyful spirit and a vibrant physical state of being. I'm your guide, Professor Sarah, storyteller, teacher, and wellness enthusiast. Reach into the vitality of your own girlhood to supercharge your grown-up life. Hello and welcome back to Lifeiness. I'm so excited today about this episode and the next few episodes. Today we're going to be talking to Jessi Fiske, who's an organic farmer and an herbalist and a Qoya instructor. And I'll tell you about how I met her in a few moments. But first, I wanted to just do a short preview of the next few episodes. And that is next week, we're going to be talking to Nikisha Williams, who is an award-winning author, a local author here in Jacksonville. She's also a publisher and a podcaster. So she has a show called Black and Published. So that's very exciting. And then we're going to talk about the healing arts and body work with Julia Everson, a Reiki master and massage therapist. And then the next one will be with psychologist and author Tracy Alloway, who recently published a book called Think Like a Girl. So I'm really excited to be sitting down with these amazing women. So I've been thinking a little bit about Mother's Day, which is coming up, and not in the sense that you might think, not about my own motherhood or my own mother even, but it's a little bit deeper than that. And I hope it's something that everyone, whether you're a woman or not, a mother or not, that you can kind of connect to. But first, I have a little story of my own to give you also a little bit of context about this podcast. This is not the reason for the podcast, but it definitely led me down a path that I didn't think I would be on at this point in my life. So not even 2 years ago, I got into a relationship that moved a little too fast, a little too much. I should have known better, but it definitely threw me for a loop. At first, I thought it was perfect. Everything was great. And so, of course, we got engaged not 4 months into it. So I should have known. I think others around me knew this. But it was a case where he was very misguided. He definitely misrepresented himself. But I should have been able to be a little bit more in touch with my intuition. So this is not a story about him. Things fell apart. And as I was picking up the pieces and trying to figure out what happened, I began to formulate some kind of new ideas about my personal and spiritual life. And at some point, I realized that there are 4 things that were really important to me. They are freedom, safety, play, and relaxation. And I know these sound familiar from the podcast. And that's why I say this is context for this podcast. In whatever capacity I could have these, I wanted these things for my life. So I got really clear about it and kind of condensed it down to this. And I wanted freedom and safety in equal measure. Safety is very important, but having freedom within a relationship is so important. And I realized I can only do that and have that if I provided that for myself. So this began a little revolution in my personal life. So things like not returning texts when I wasn't ready to return texts, maybe not sending out Christmas cards or not feeling guilty about it. I haven't sent out Christmas cards in a long time. Taking naps in the middle of the day, just nurturing myself with good food and exercise and all the things I needed. Self-massage, sprawling out on the grass whenever I wanted to. All these little acts they started bringing me closer to myself, closer to my own desires, and closer to my integrity. So these are things, a lot of them were just very, physical things that I would do, like calming the nervous system, but that helps support a richer and a stronger spiritual life. So I began to become kinder to myself than to anyone I've ever loved, except maybe my babies, right? So I became very tender with myself. And suddenly there became this great and benevolent kind of mother feeling inside me. And this is something that I think everyone can experience. So it was almost like a divine mother rose up from inside me who cradled me and allowed me the freedom and the empowerment that I needed, and also protected me from anything that wasn't good for me, only allowed the empowered masculine energies. If I were going to meet someone who would take just as good of care of me as I was taking care of myself. So that was almost like a powerful image. So I kind of created this idea inside of me. And as I was continuing to pick up the pieces from this relationship, I was also following the NXIVM scandal, which if you don't know about it, it's basically, it was a cult that kind of developed within this corporation called NXIVM. And I was watching this documentary thinking that this cult leader who took advantage of his employees, his followers, and especially, young women, the manipulations that occurred felt very similar to what might happen between a couple. This kind of emotional manipulation. It felt so familiar. So I was thinking, gosh, I really want to talk about this. I want to write about this. I don't think I ever imagined that I would do a podcast about it, and one of the things that occurred to me is that no matter what your belief system is, or your organization, or your job, whatever you rely on for your sense of security, it might be your significant other, you're still going to need to serve as your own guru, or perhaps maybe your own mother, right? Your own parent. Because whether you're into astrology or the Catholic Church, or you're just a big believer in the benefits of capitalism, doesn't matter what it is. Staying in touch with your own divine understanding of yourself is key. And the reason I'm getting into this today is because my guest has a lot of wonderful advice for staying in touch and supporting your body and getting into a space where even when it's painful, you can find embodiment. You can connect to the intuitive powers of your senses, and you can only do that really through practice. Like for me, I feel like I lost connection with my intuitive senses. I did not pay attention to them. And once I returned and I felt cradled, I felt nurtured, I felt supported, then it was really easy to find my way, right? To find my compass. That being said, there's a lot of systems in place. There's families, there's relationships that really can support you, can help you find your North Star, but you always have to be vigilant as your own, I like to say, be your own guru, I'm not really big into gurus or following spiritual leaders necessarily. But if you are going to have a guru or a priest or someone you follow, first and foremost, be your own guru. So in this interview, Jessi, who's a Qoya instructor, she brings up an excellent point that I've completely overlooked so far. In her gentle way, she reminds me that embodiment does not necessarily feel good for everyone all the time, especially like if you've been disconnected or like in pain for a long time, like especially at first. So if you've neglected your body or your mind-body connection for a long time, feeling all those parts at first is going to not feel all that joyful. Maybe you've simply been angry at your body for not being or doing exactly what you want. But what I love about this is that Jessi says we need to remember, this is a Qoya kind of motto, is remember you're wise, wild, and free. It really aligns with lifiness. And, with some of the things that I was saying earlier about what I realized. And that is, you're remembering your own wisdom. You're remembering your own senses, those senses that you were born with that help you stay away from bad people and bad energy and keep you safe, like a protector, like a mother. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Jessi. So I met Jessi a few months ago after reading a book by Rochelle Schieck, who is the founder of the Qoya movement. I was blown away at how similar Qoya is in some of its principles to the notion of lifiness. So of course I found a local group or a local class, and the only instructor that I know of in the Jacksonville area, Jessi Fiske, and we met on the beach and basically sat in a circle. We talked, we moved, we danced. One of the coolest things was the shaking. You kind of shake your hands and shake your feet. You just kind of shake it all out before you really get into it. There's a little bit of yoga, great music, like wonderful music. So basically it's just free dance, but it's guided free dance. It's almost like Jessi gives you that space to improvise and feel into your body and just kind of return to that divine embodiment. So I think she's doing just wonderful things here with her practice. So thanks for being here. And what is Qoya?
So Qoya is a movement practice, and it combines elements of dance, yoga, intuitive movement, and also community connection. So really, and what it's about is getting into your body and thinking more about what it feels like to be moving in your body and less about what it looks like. So you're finding what feels good, what feels authentic. There's no way to do it right. That's one of the things that really draws me to Qoya, is that you can be in the class and there's no goal. There's no one person, even the teacher in the class, that's better at Qoya than anyone else. And the way that we show up in Qoya each day can be different because, to be honest, like some days we have a lot of energy and some days we have less. And however you show up in Qoya and however you move and whatever you do and whatever you think and you feel, it's all okay and it's all allowed.
Yeah, I had so much fun in our session like a couple weeks ago. That's exactly how it felt. Like I didn't feel like, I had to look in the mirror and see how I wasn't looking at myself from the outside looking in, but I was feeling it. So, and you had mentioned, I think then, that you went to a retreat with Rochelle, who is the founder of Qoya. So can you tell me a little bit about, I know the history is not very long. It's a pretty recent movement. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the retreat was actually my intensive teacher training that I went to. It was a week long with the founder of Qoya, Rochelle Schieck. And she lives in upstate New York. She developed Qoya about 10 years ago, and it came to her in a vision while she was in the Andes. in Peru, and she has always been a dancer and a yoga instructor. And it came to her to create this class that really honored the feminine way of being and the feminine way of moving.
So I see like on her website, it says, we remember that we are wise, wild, and free. Wise, wild, and free.
Yeah. So that's how we start each class with the phrase, we remember through movement, through moving our bodies in this way that's unscripted and this way that feels good. We remember our true essence is wise, wild, and free. And I love to think about remember as this conscious thing that happens, like literally remembering these concepts, but also remember as in to bring back parts of ourselves that have gone missing over the years. So to remember, bring back in our wildness, bring back in our freedom, and bring back in our wisdom that exists within ourselves when we just take the time to listen.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. That feels, I mean, I just started this podcast like 2 months ago. And when I was in the class last time, I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly my philosophy. So that feels good. Like, instead of it feeling like, wait a minute, like this is mine. Like I came up with this. It's like, it feels like there's something out there, like meaning like there's something out there in the universe that Rochelle was really like tapping into, that all of us can tap into, because it's just kind of there. So that felt really good. But going back to what you're saying, like kind of like remember, like putting back together, like finding the pieces, and doing it in this improvisational way, which I also love improv. So the two art forms that I have focused on so far in the podcast are dance and improv. And this is dance and improv. That's what this is. But I like the philosophical foundation of it. So, with that being said, I want to know about kind of like your own personal history when it comes to like remembering playfulness, like remembering parts of yourself, your childhood self, your girlhood, like what is your adult history with playfulness? How did you learn to become playful again, or has it been shut down for a long time?
Yeah, I think back to when I went to college, and the question is, what are you going to be when you grow up? And I knew that I would probably never have like a job. So part of me really like retained that sense of playfulness from that time. I knew I wanted to work outdoors, and went into like biological research and finally found farming. And farming was really the thing that stuck, that felt like joyful play to me. I did that, moving around to several farms for years when I was younger, and finally got my own farm and started my own vegetable and herb selling business. And that's where things kind of started to go south a little bit. And I started to lose that sense of play, to be honest. When I first started my business, it really lit me up. I was very inspired. But unfortunately, I tried to grow. My business was very popular. People loved it. And I kind of just sunk into the idea that it should get bigger. I had employees, and suddenly I had to make enough money to pay my employees. So I was spending a lot of time on the computer with marketing and less time outside, and really didn't heed the call of my body that like I was really longing for a change. And eventually that led to burnout and my body breaking down, and not being able to farm anymore. So, and Qoya has really been my sort of rediscovery of feeling into my body, finding what feels good, finding like where I'm called next, and just really being able to listen in deeply and to see what life has in store for me next from a place from within.
I didn't know that piece of it. But I feel like that's a cautionary tale for people who like, it's like you jumped into your passion in a very playful way, meaning like, you just like a child, their work is their play. So your work was your play. There were pressures from the kind of society that we live in, meaning like, you have to make a certain amount and you're supposed to grow each year. That's just the nature of capitalism. But there's so much pressure there where you can like lose touch with what's, what kind of started you on that path in the first place, which is being outside. Can you dig in a little bit and tell me kind of what happened? Like at what point did you know? Because it sounds like you were really listening to your intuition as much as like things kind of fell apart. When they fell apart, you responded. So what happened there?
Just a really strong feeling that I just couldn't do it anymore. I struggle with endometriosis. So that's been kind of a lifelong struggle for me. And at that point, when I was finishing up my business, I was in pain more often than I wasn't. So I really knew that like I had to make a major shift in my life, and just really have spent the last couple of years recouping and healing myself from that burnout.
That's so powerful, like that self-healing. Because some people don't do that, and they just run themselves completely into the ground. So that's great that you're on the way back. Okay, so as a Qoya instructor, how do you incorporate themes of joyful embodiment and play? Like, specific examples. Like, what are some things that listeners could kind of take away? Like, how do you incorporate that feeling of playfulness and embodiment?
Yeah, so one thing that I always say in Qoya class is to think about less about what it looks like. So many dance classes, I feel like you're trying to get the dance right, and either you can dance or you can't dance. But inherently, we can all dance. We can all imagine like little babies bopping to music, or little girls twirling around when they hear a song that they like. So I'm always reminding people to like to change what you're doing so that it maybe feels a little bit better. So whatever movement you're doing right now, like, how can you adjust just a little bit so that it feels better? I think that can bring a lot of joyfulness into the movement.
Yeah, I love that. My daughter when she was little, and then my son when he was little, like it's like they found the dishwasher and they love the rhythm of the dishwasher. And I always thought that was so cool because we don't hear those rhythms anymore. Those are these, catchy rhythms that don't really like light us up anymore because it's like, it's a dishwasher. But it was so cute.
I think we crave those rhythms, like being at a drum circle or those big beats, and then there's that instinct to move, and a lot of times we're suppressing that. Like you can't, maybe you're at the office and you're not necessarily going to be dancing, breaking out into a big dance, but like if we could all gift ourselves that time to listen to music that we love and just to like let ourselves move however we want to move to the music.
Yeah.
And that could be 3 minutes, like put on a song you love, or even put on shuffle and dance to whatever comes on.
Mm-hmm. I wonder how it has impacted your own creativity. Like, are there any examples that you have of how Qoya has, made you feel like a more creative person?
It's hard to know what's what sometimes, but right. I do practice Qoya a lot, and I have developed a new love of writing. So I'm not sure if that is related exactly, but I think just giving myself that space to just be free and like to be allowed to be however I am that day, to show up exactly how I am, feel exactly how I'm feeling. It just really like it has unleashed these words that want to come out. So that's my main creative expression right now. Yeah.
I'm really curious about how you create like a playful and inviting space for your students. Like I'm sure that by, is it a certification that you have in Qoya?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when you did that training, there is some specific things that you set, that you are told to kind of like set it up this way. What are some of those things?
Right. So I actually taught a retreat, and the women who came, none of them had done Qoya, and they were very, very nervous about it. And within the first 5 minutes, like I could see them all like really take a big sigh of calm down. And I think it's because we start the class saying there's no way that you can do it wrong. You can lay on your mat the whole time if you want to, if that's what you're feeling called to that day. We also start the class with a theme and a bit of like a vulnerability. So I start the class with this theme that I've personally been working on, and I share something in my life related to that theme. And it really gets people thinking, like, I'm not up here telling you how you should be or how I know more than you about your journey. I'm on the journey with you. So when we dance on the beach, I feel a little self-conscious to dance on the beach too. And we're just a group of women, exploring and playing together, being curious.
That is such a treat, doing it on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
That was so beautiful. The thing about the beach is you never know what the day's gonna be like, but it is so beautiful. I also love your playlist. Like your playlist last time was perfect. It was so good.
Thank you. That's one of my favorite parts, is making the playlist.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So are there suggestions, or is it just you coming up with music?
Yeah. So every Qoya class has pillars. So we do the similar dances in the same order. And there are like a long list of suggestions for each type of dance that we do.
Mm-hmm. It would be so cool if you could do that every Sunday, and we could just call it church. Like, I'm just going to church.
Yeah, dance church.
Dance
I love it.
church. Yeah. Maybe in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in what ways do you infuse elements of joy and play into your daily life?
Well, I'm very privileged right now to have not a ton of obligations. So my life is very flowy, and I can sort of gravitate towards whatever feels right in the moment. And that feels really playful to me, especially after coming out of the structure of running my business for so long. So if I feel like I'm doing an herbal study program right now, if I feel like studying, I can do that, or I can go in my kitchen and make medicine. I can be in the garden. I can dance. And that just ability to let myself flow from activity to activity naturally just feels like a wonderful form of play right now.
That's awesome. I'm on sabbatical right now, so I feel the same way.
So nice.
And it's so nice to spend time with my kids. Like, I'll stay up like really late, with them, where I normally wouldn't do that. Like on the weekends. Like, my son is 16, and now he's just such a night owl. And it's like, I just stay up with him, and he plays piano in the middle of the night. And it's this wonderful time in the middle of my life that I never thought I would have it, because there's so many years of hustle and grind, and now it sounds like you and I are kind of in the same space, and it feels like such a privilege, especially when the kids are still at home, but their lives are a little bit different now because they're older. So that's amazing I love that you flow from one thing to the next. So like, some people talk about being in the creative flow, and a lot of that is like really intense creative energy. But I like the idea of what we're doing, just like flow from one thing to the next.
Yeah, I'm done the thing where I try to structure out my posts and, for my business.
Yeah.
And like, I just don't feel that creativity for me doesn't happen that way. It comes very organically, where I'll get an inspiration and write it down. And I think that is a more natural way of being for people.
Yeah, it's definitely a feminine creative flow that way. Like, I know at some point I need to get into a good routine so I can kind of like tame all of that creative chaos. But right now I'm like, no, we're just going with it.
And it's so nice to be able to take breaks.
It is. Oh yeah. So I'm a little bit obsessed with people's stories of recovering their health. And you mentioned recently that you've really been prioritizing relaxation and rest. So we touched on this. But I wonder, just kind of like how you're feeling these days.
Well, I'm definitely having a lot less pain. But to be honest, like I still have health struggles. And I take such good care of myself
Oh, that's
with
great.
herbs and diet. And yeah, I just believe that I'm going through a larger process and I'm not putting any sort of time limit on what my healing looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I know a lot of people who are going through different things for different reasons, a lot of them stress related, but yeah, the idea of having like a goal for your weight or a goal for this or that. And then, seeing all this pressure on social media, like, look what I did in 90 days or look, but rather doing it in a more holistic manner where you're like, no, I'm always going to support my body as much as possible.
Right.
And it's going to take its time to do its thing. And there's all these different phases of life. And it sounds like you do all kinds of things to support your life.
Right. I'm really into nourishment, and that is definitely a lifelong process. Like, you can try a cleanse for 2 weeks and maybe you'll feel good afterwards. But if you go back to what you were eating before, you're just going to wind up feeling as bad as you did before the cleanse. What our bodies really need is constant nourishment and support. Yeah. And if you really tune in and start to notice your energy levels without judgment, I think is really the key. Like, some days you'll feel really energetic and creative and want to be social and accomplish a million things. And some days you just want to maybe have a pajama day and like stay in and read a novel, and we can let it all be okay.
Can you share some personal stories about how play, just feeling more embodied, has impacted maybe one of your students or maybe somebody that you met at a retreat?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite students who comes to my class all the time has expressed just really difficulty in her work, and comes to Qoya just because it gives her a little like spot of joy and hopefulness every time that she comes. And that just really warms my heart that it's able to do that for her.
I don't know if you've listened to any, or if you remember any specific episode of the podcast, but did any of the content or like the theme strike you as Qoya aligned?
Yeah, so of course I had to listen to the one about dance, and I just loved her. And I loved the way she was talking about anxiety with that beat. Like, that's just really stuck in my head. And then when she was mentioning teaching, even yoga and Pilates, and the way that she encourages people to show up in however they are that day, and how she can really just see their bodies like settle down. We just really all need space to just be and give ourselves that. And it's especially nourishing, I think, to do it in a group of other women.
Yeah, I bet you see that. Just like she saw that, she could just see it in their bodies. I bet you have that experience a lot.
Yeah. So when people first come into Qoya, they maybe are like, this is a little weird. I don't know what I'm doing. And then you can almost see them like come grounded down and be like, oh, this is fun and it feels good. And by the end, pretty much everybody's smiling.
That's awesome. Yeah, you are doing such amazing work by holding space. Like Becca was talking about, I think we were joking about how we just need someone to tell us to breathe or tell us that we can stay still. And so basically you're giving space not only to breathe and meditate and take some time, but to like be playful. Right. And to like get in rhythm with your body. Like you're doing so many wonderful things with Qoya.
Yeah. And that brought to mind really the shaking part of the class, where we really are just like moving as much as possible and trying to shake it out. That's part of maybe like a yoga class that you wouldn't normally get. And it just like really opens up space and like releases whatever is ready to go that you're ready to let go of. And it, not from your thinking mind, but just something about moving your body in that way just opens up space.
Yeah, you have to get like past that. I forgot about the shaking. I love the shaking. The shaking is the best. You're right. You can't get that in any other class. Like there is no, when you go to a yoga class or a Tai Chi class or something, you kind of have to force yourself into getting all flowy and everything. But I think if we could just stomp around, maybe shake a little bit, then it makes it easier to be flowy and to be calm, and to sit still.
Right. You kind of have to move past that, maybe a little bit more hyper energy to be able to get into that flow space.
What are some challenges or barriers that your students or you find in embracing, either embracing kind of like the Qoya movements or just embodiment in general?
Yeah. Well, as far as Qoya goes, a lot of women have told me that they don't know how to dance and that they would just feel so self-conscious moving like that in a group of people. And even when I've suggested online class, they would maybe even feel self-conscious moving that way in front of themselves. So, yeah, so it's been a little bit hard sometimes to get people to even open up to try it. And as far as embodiment goes, and one thing that I did want to mention is that sometimes when you're coming into embodiment, and this was definitely true for me, is that it doesn't feel joyful and good right away. You kind of feel all the hurty bits that you were ignoring for so long for a while, and kind of have to sit with your body and become really honest with yourself about how maybe you haven't served and honored your body in the best way for however long that stressful situation's been going on. And but once you do that and you cultivate these more joyful expressions of embodiment, just little sparks of joy start coming in, and then you can let those grow with more practice.
That is such a good point. I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is so true. It's like, I love the idea of joyful embodiment, and I'm like, joyful embodiment. But you're right. Embodiment is not joyful when you get started. Not necessarily. I've been reading a book by Peter Levine who talks a lot about trauma. Have you read his work with somatic experiencing?
I've heard a lot about it. Yeah.
He's worked with a lot of veterans, or people who've gone through a lot of childhood trauma. And he mentions that a lot. It's like, this is not necessarily going to feel good at first. Paying attention to those emotions that are just kind of stuck in your body, or whatever it might be, those pain points. And he has some really cool somatic exercises, such as just humming. They would go hand in hand with Qoya, I think, some of the stuff that he has. But you're right. I'm so glad you pointed that out, because that's true. It's like you have to get to that place to have a fulfilling relationship with mind and body connection, but it's not going to feel good at first necessarily. So I'm sure you deal with that all the time with women.
Yeah, and with myself, sometimes embodiment feels good, and sometimes, my hip hurts, and it's all part of it. It's not, there's not a goal. There's no attainment, all of a sudden embodiment's going to feel joyful, but it will feel authentic and true and genuine to yourself. And being able to be genuine and true, I think, is really a gift.
It makes me sad that there are women who don't think that they can do those, or don't think they'd feel comfortable doing some of those movements at home by themselves.
Yeah, and I try to emphasize when I describe Qoya that you can just come and actually just feel the rhythm of the music. You don't have to do anything. You can sway back and forth. It's all welcome.
I think we've just been so trained to be good students in a classroom, just follow along and do what others are doing, which is so interesting, because you're right. It's very innate with young children.
Right. And I think Qoya is set up so that you're not looking to me as the teacher for guidance, but really maybe closing your eyes and looking within and feeling how you want to move.
Yeah.
That's kind of the point of it, is that it's not led, by someone telling you that this is good for you. It's about you finding what is good for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. How can people at home, what can listeners do to kind of incorporate specifically, dance, perhaps Qoya? How can they connect to Qoya at home? But of course, if they live in Jacksonville, how can they connect to you?
Yeah, so I teach monthly at different places. You can follow me at my Instagram. It's jessi.lynn.fiske, Fiske. For local classes, online classes, you can go to Qoya.love. Lots of teachers are teaching weekly online. But as far as just like experimenting with some of these ideas on your own, you could just put on a slow song and do stretches that feel good, intuitively moving from one position to another. Or you could put on a fast song and just shake it out or do your own dance. A little bit at a time really makes a big difference.
Awesome. And I'll definitely put your information in the show notes. Your website will be there and everything. Okay. Well, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sarah.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Remember to follow me on Instagram at Book of Lifeiness. And also remember to be kind to yourself, support yourself, and nurture that inner divine mother who's supporting you. And a happy Mother's Day to everyone.